The message was there at 3:17 a.m., typed on a machine with no paper, no power, and no one in the room. The first time anyone heard it, it sounded like rain on a tin roof. Only it was coming from the spare room, and the forecast was clear. It was 1987, a small upstairs flat in a Midwestern family home, with the kind of creaky hallway that remembers every footstep and the kind of wallpaper that was fashionable once, then never again. In the corner sat an L.C. Smith typewriter, black enamel, bone-white letters worn to ovals, the ribbon's iron smell like an old library. No one had touched it for weeks, but at 3 a.m., the keys began to chatter. Not random, rhythmic, accelerating, as if catching up on something long overdue. When the light snapped on, the carriage had ratcheted itself to the far right margin, the way a sentence ends when there's nowhere else to go. No paper, just silence, and a feeling that the room wasn't empty anymore. Stories like this get dismissed as creaks and drafts until they don't. Across the Atlantic, around the same decade, a schoolteacher named Ken Webster started finding messages on a BBC microcomputer that wasn't networked to anything, written in an anachronistic, Tudor-tinged English by someone calling himself Lucas from the 1500s, and occasionally by a presence claiming to be from 2109, acting like hall monitors for time itself. Those events, now known as the Dodleston Messages, were published as the vertical plane, and they left researchers with questions that outlived the hardware that carried them. If a computer could become a postbox for centuries, what could a typewriter be? What could it do if no one was sitting there? This is a story about the messages that arrive when the room is empty, and about the very real danger spelled out by machines even when there's nothing supernatural about them. In the 20th century, typewriters were criminal witnesses. They left signatures on ransom notes, the way a thumb leaves a print. In the Coors kidnapping of 1960, FBI examiners believed the ransom note was typed on the suspect's own machine, a mechanical voice that pointed back to its owner. In the Lindbergh case, 8 experts testified that handwriting tied Bruno Richard Hauptmann to the notes that ended a nation's hope. The line between ink and prison was a thin one, and in the Leopold and Loeb case, an Underwood portable, used for study sheets, echoed back in a ransom letter, a machine that remembered its operator in the scars of its type. Objects talk, even when we pretend they can't. Our protagonist inherits an old apartment and an older L.C. Smith, along with a compact family history of sudden goodbyes. A grandfather lost at the kitchen table, 2 grandmothers gone a week apart, the kind of grief that rearranges a house's soundscape. He moves upstairs alone in 87, tells himself the clacks in the night are heat, or mice, or memory. Then the keys erupt again. This time he feeds a sheet into the carriage, centers it, and waits. He is not the first to wait on a machine for an answer. But what comes through will not read like a seance. It will read like a warning. The first fully printed line appears 2 nights later, blocky and misaligned, where the E sits a hair low and the T bites a fraction too hard. Exactly the kind of typewriter fingerprint old-school examiners love. The mechanical quirks that make each machine as unique as a voice. It says, retype what was taken. Then a pause, then 3 letters, uneven, R-E-A. It's a fragment that feels familiar, like catching a lyric out of a passing car. Across old case files, the same logic presides. Every typewriter leaves a trail, worn slugs, bent stems, scars from long ago repairs. And that's how investigators aligned ransom notes to suspects' desks, like in the Coors case where examiners tied the note to the suspect's machine, or in Chicago when an Underwood became a reluctant accomplice. A request to retype what was taken sounds like a demand for restitution, but it also sounds like procedure. Make the copy, compare the strikes, find the match. He begins to test the room. He types his name and a date, April 1987, then steps away. 15 minutes later, the carriage is slammed to the far right again, and the paper is replaced with a new sheet pulled from the drawer, which would be a magic trick except the drawer sticks, and he had to shoulder it open the first time. New line. April is when doors stick. It's a taunt or a joke, and it lands like a cold coin on the back of the neck. Jokes don't prove hauntings, but they do sound like someone getting comfortable. In the Dodelston affair, the voices warmed up too. They started folksy, then grew specific. Names like Richard Wishel, places like Nantwich, details that researchers could chase across parish records like they were following footprints through fresh snow. Specifics matter. They're either breadcrumbs or bait. The escalation comes in two peaks. Peak 1. The typewriter starts producing dates that predate the upstairs flat and reference the original farmstead. "Red stone under kitchen," reads one strip, and the protagonist actually knows this. Red stone footings were discovered under a kitchen in a centuries-old cottage in the Dodelston narrative, a ghost of architecture beneath a modern floor. How does a Midwestern flat know about Cheshire stone? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe something, or someone, does. He writes back, "Who are you?" The machine replies, "Not a who." That would be comforting if it didn't also sound like something a system would say. Pause and reflect. When machines carry messages, they're either conduits or culprits. In real investigations, the culprit is human, someone feeding threats through a keyboard that can be forensically traced. The FBI believed the Corps' ransom note came off Corbett's machine. 8 experts tied Hauptmann's hand to tragedy in the Lindbergh case. The Underwood shadows Leopold. The danger in messages from the past is rarely spectral. It's that past cases teach that typed words can kill because they are evidence in motion. Peak 2, a page appears with a precise header. June 10th, 1950, basement. That date rings out. In 1950, a famous perjury conviction hinged on typewriter identification. How a Woodstock standard helped nail down testimony. Different case, different city, same forensic backbone. He rushes to the basement, finds a metal box beneath a loose stair tread, inside a stack of carbon copies, old neighborhood watch circulars, one unsigned letter that says, "If you don't move the fence by Friday, I will move it for you." The fence was moved, the neighbor moved out. The story was told at barbecues. The unsigned letter is typed by an L.C. Smith with a low E and an over-inked T. The house has had a voice for decades. The message on the desk upstairs isn't a haunting, it's a loop closing. The twist isn't that a ghost is typing. It's that the typewriter is telling on someone who learned long before that a machine could be a mask until a specialist turned it into a mirror. He takes the carbon copies to a local librarian who knows how to find things that don't want to be found. The librarian cross-references city permit fights from the late 40s through the 60s, finds complaint letters about a fence, about late-night noise, about property lines. One anonymous letter threatens a boy walking home. He maps the dates to the basement stack and the anomalies in the L.C. Smith's type. The low E, the aggressive T, a faint nick on the R. It's the same machine. The same hand behind the keys? Maybe. Or a family heirloom passed down like a grudge. He writes onto fresh paper. What was taken? The response in 3 lines with hard returns between them. Land, time, names. He thinks of Dodelston, where messages worried over trespass. Who belongs to a plot of earth? In what century? Under whose rules? In those messages, Lucas bristled that strangers occupied his home, and a presence from 2109 scolded the experimenters when the conversation strayed into forbidden territory. Beneath the theater of time travel was a simple human ache. Intrusion. Here too, intrusion. Fences, basements, letters hammered by steel arms was the underlying note. The immediate danger crystallizes when a new page clatters out at 3:17 a.m. Stop digging or I make you move. It reads like the 1950 letter's descendant. The police won't come out for ancient type bars and family feuds, but the advice from real cases is clear. Treat typed threats as fingerprints. He logs everything, takes high-contrast photos of the page, and, channeling the logic of the Corps and Leopold investigations, compares the fresh sheet to the basement carbons. The signature is identical. The threat isn't supernatural, it's inherited. Someone with access to the flat, keys, familiarity, lineage, has been using the old machine to replay an old intimidation ritual, betting that the romance of a haunted typewriter will distract from the very modern crime of stalking. He changes the locks. He moves the L.C. Smith to a storage unit. Then he does the riskiest, smartest thing. He leaves a decoy, a cheap electric in the same corner, a camera watching the desk, a note taped to the empty ribbon spool. Retype what was taken. Nothing happens for 3 nights. On the 4th, there's an intruder on video, a silhouette with careful hands placing a sheet and striking keys that will never mark paper. The threat evaporates the way a myth does when the lights come up. In the morning, he wheels the L.C. Smith to the precinct with the carbons and the video. The officer on duty, gray at the temples, steady eyes, runs a fingertip over the misaligned E and says, "Machines remember. So do houses. So do people." In the aftermath, a restraining order, a paper trail, and a family conversation that should have happened 30 years ago finally occurs around a kitchen table that has seen too many endings. The typewriter is cataloged, photographed, and, because artifacts also heal, donated to a local museum's forensic exhibit, alongside a placard that explains how machines speak. Misaligned sorts, bruised ribbons, recurring defects, the very clues that tethered ransom notes to suspects in the Corps' investigation and anchored notorious prosecutions when signatures were mechanical, not inked by hand. The moral question lingers. When messages arrive from the past, is the ethical choice to commune or to investigate? Maybe the answer is both. Be curious, be kind, and never confuse mystery for menace until the facts are typed line by line.
Don't forget to subscribe to Real Mystery Reports for more strange, dark, and profoundly human stories. New true mysteries every day.